Hi y'all. Well, this has been a fun morning. Um, what did we do? We started out with checking all the videos and stuff for this week, and all of them were corrupt, so I had to reload those and find new ones. And then the entire discussion board got deleted, so I had to redesign it. And then I find out that for some reason the PowerPoint was deleted, so I had to redo that. So I'm having a good time here. I hope you all are. Hey, last week we talked about investigation. The things I want you to get from investigation, the idea is that, probably first and foremost is many people have the idea that they're going to go to the academy, get hired by an agency as a detective, go to the academy, finish the academy, come out, walk in on Monday morning after a weekend of partying, and they're I'm sorry, I'm making sure because the video didn't record the first time, so making sure that it's recording, so that they'll finish the party, they'll come in Monday, stack of homicides will be given to them to be solved by Friday afternoon. And the bottom line is, it's not going to work that way. If you go to work for the sheriff's department or a local agency, sheriff's department, you're going to have to work the custody facility for a while. Good deal, because you get to know what a crook looks like, and you get to see how manipulative they can be. After that, it may be a shorter period of time, maybe a longer period of time, up to years. Then you go to patrol. Maybe if you're in custody and you're working hard and you're making cases in custody, doing good investigations while you're in the custody division, you may have a crack at taking the detective's test. But usually you go to patrol. You're in patrol for a period of years, and then you can apply for a detective and then take that. It's usually promotional, at least at Orange County Sheriff's it is. LA County may be different, and I don't know about San Bernardino, Riverside, San Diego. But, that's kind of what you're looking at. Then the next thing that comes up is the local agency, a city police department. If you're in a city police department, you will definitely work patrol for a period of time. The old TV shows where the young-looking, recruit would be taken and put into the high schools as an undercover. Not happening now. May have happened, 25 years ago. It's not happening now. And the agency's got to figure out if you know how to investigate, if you can talk to people. That's going to be the really important thing, is learning how to talk to people. Some of you are going to develop good skills. Some of you have good skills now, but many of you don't. And it's just a matter of the age. The age now is of text messages in code and emails. And people don't even talk on the telephone, much anymore, especially to get important things across. They text or send an email on it. So there are some things that are going to happen in investigation. The other things for you to think about as far as the future is the idea of clearance rates. If you're a detective, you got to clear cases, and that's going to be either through arrests or cleared other or cleared exceptional. We talked about that before, last week. So those are, some of the things. If you get into investigation or you want to get in there, be dogged, meaning work everything to the bone. Spend hours. There's a guy that I used to work with, and you might know him, but he's when he was a detective for us, oh my God, that guy was so thorough. I remember doing a search warrant, and it was potential for some violence, so SWAT served the search warrant. We get into the place, and it's this little small room it's not much bigger than a public bathroom, basically, at Nordstrom's. And we were in there for hours as he looked through every piece of paper looking for evidence. It was about 110 degrees in the room. Oh my goodness. And he just about got thrown out of the room, got thrown out of the window. But he was dogged. He really went after what he was doing. The advantage of me having to do 2 of these is that we may be able to get out of here a little bit quicker than at least the last video was. So, talking about policing the police. The first thing is you're going to, find commissions talked about, from Wickersham, Kerner, and on. Make sure you understand what each of those was about. As an example, Wickersham looked at the entire criminal justice system. And part of it was because of the perceived issues with the Volstead Act, with prohibition. So August Vollmer, was the author, remember, from the professional era, and that's what that was about. Kerner Commission was about how the police responded to civil unrest in the 1960s. Knapp Commission was brought on by Serpico. The movie's out there, and I got a chance to see it. It's fictionalized, but it's a good movie. And then Mullen Commission in the 90s. Again, New York, talking about corruption and brutality. New York has a long history of both of those, corruption and brutality. Another good thing, you look at Serpico, another interesting movie talks about New Orleans and the Big Easy, about corruption. Again, fictionalized, not based on a true story, but give you some idea as to the fact of how ingrained it gets in a department. The last one we talk about in this group is the Christopher Commission, and that's an investigation of Rodney King and then the results from that. So when it comes to police complaints, or it comes to misconduct or internal affairs, first let's look at the entire big picture management police department. We talked about the idea earlier in the semester where a police department will have a mission statement or a mission, vision, values, and it will be on the back wall. Every officer, when they walk in from the parking lot before the shift, at the end of the shift, they'll see these, these values. And predictably, they are community service, integrity, accountability, those kind of things, for values at least. Here's the problem though, if the viewpoint of management is that that supervisors hold officers accountable and officers hold themselves and other officers accountable, and managers don't hold themselves accountable, the troops are going to figure that out. They're going to understand that. So that's that's going to lead to a culture within an organization, and that organizational culture will indicate to officers what they can get away with. Physically, can they get away with things? Can they be assaultive? And quite possibly so. Now, or perhaps, gratuities. Gratuities may be widespread through a department. And it may be beyond a cup of coffee or a soda at 7-Eleven. I've never been a real big, taker of those, but I've also never really thought those were bad. I think what is bad is, I remember back in my early days, when I was a little baby policeman, is going to going to work, or seeing guys come into work on their day off and putting on their uniforms and going out at Christmas time to do their Christmas shopping. I used to call it doing their shopping clothes, because they would get a gratuity. Best Buy, I think it was, or one of those places, gave a great discount to cops. And cops would go in and would take advantage of that. See, then they would also expect something on the back end. But, it isn't the idea of expecting on the back end, it's the idea of the fact that officers put themselves in a position where somebody may ask them for something later. But that comes down to organizational culture. The next stopping point for misconduct is the FTO program. The FTO program is going to teach that organizational culture. And it's really important that officers, react well and do the right thing when it comes to how an organization deals with problems, and how they train their people. Field training, you got to have a solid program. You got to have solid people. And when those people get less than solid, you have to get rid of them. And you'll see how that runs through an organization. An example was, a particular pursuit, late at night, kind of goes all over, and an officer and his trainee want to get in the pursuit. Well, they've been going for a while. There were 2 officers and a sergeant were assigned, which is what the county protocol is and the department policy. So I told them, no, don't go. And apparently inside the car, the FTO turns to the trainee and says, well, you may say no, but we're going anyway, because they need help. So off they go into the pursuit. Pursuit goes sideways. There's a shooting. Driver of the car gets hit. Just awful stuff. And found out about this. The guy was there at the scene. Figured out the whole deal. Internal Affairs investigation starts. He ends up getting removed from the FTO program for misconduct. Now, here's the thing about organizational culture, though. That's what he told the trainee. Trainee goes off of training, works at the department for a while, and laterals to another agency. At that agency, they get involved in a pursuit, supposedly, after a burglary, and officer crashes. Well, it turns out that the burglary was made up, and when he was questioned in Internal Affairs, the officer was very forthcoming and said, that's the way I got trained in Irvine about that. Ah! So you can see how that goes. It can go throughout a culture. First line supervisors are the next area. And that is knowing what your people are doing, following up on calls, listening to how they're talking to people. If some correction needs to be done or some discussion about that, it's done. It's not just passed over and I'll take care of myself, because that leads to bad things. The next step is internal affairs, and they run investigations within a process. What that means is that the internal affairs investigators have to follow what's known as AB 301. AB 301 is the Peace Officers Bill of Rights. You may take a look at it, or you might want to take a look at it. Google it in California. AB 301, Peace Officers Bill of Rights, tells you basically how management is supposed to conduct an investigation. At least interviews with officers, and they didn't do it. The management really abused, like everything else that we've talked about in this course. When it comes, something changes because of some abuse, and this was a prime example of that. Other things that internal affairs will do is they'll do audits. They may even do investigations of workers' comp fraud and stuff like that, because that happens, where an officer claims an injury, they go off and are doing stuff they shouldn't be able to do. One officer supposedly crashed a car supposedly in a pursuit, and the internal affairs people had some reason to not believe him, and they catch him lifting weights in a guy's garage while he's off injured, and supposedly not being able to do anything because he was actually looking at retiring and going into some other business. So when you talk about that first line supervisor, going back through that, when you make sergeant or two-striper, corporal, set an example. Be productive. Let officers know what's expected of them and hold them accountable to that. And then, of course, hold yourself accountable to things. Know the department values, enforce them, quality control, making sure that citizens may not be satisfied because it may not come out the way they want, but make sure that they are, that they're, when they call, their problem is dealt with by officers and not blown up. We just don't do that. That's not a police problem. I hated hearing that. Officers saying, "So what do you think I can do for you tonight?" No, you knucklehead. It's, how can I help you? And then when it's something that's, well, my ex isn't paying his child support, and he comes over and he criticizes the house, and I go, oh, okay. As opposed to saying, well, that's not a police problem, because it's not. Officers refer out to some other type of social service to help take care of that. Mediation, their attorneys, the court system, things of that nature. So we'll talk about in this week what happens to your complaint or to a person's complaint and the processes that are at play. Basically a complaint comes in, a person comes to the front desk, wants to complain about the conduct of an officer. Majority of complaints are about attitude, how they were spoken to. Occasionally you'll get somebody who'll come in and maybe try to get out of a ticket because of thinking that if they allege misconduct, the ticket will magically go away. And I had that with an officer that supposedly stopped a woman and then walked up to her car and said, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, you want to go out on a date?" Talks to her, flirts with her, tries to get her to go out, and she's married, and the kids are in the car, and goes, "Oh, God, that sounds horrible." And how are you going to prove otherwise? Well, this was when we first started using video in the car, and the officer had videotaped the traffic stop along with sound, and it was proved that she was totally lying, completely lying. So you see some of that. But a person comes in with a complaint, a supervisor should take that complaint, even if they don't want to fill out their name and address and all that other stuff, and write it out. Take the complaint, get the officer's name, figure out who was involved, get a statement from the person, hopefully a phone number so they can be called back and re-interviewed. And then that information should be taken to the shift lieutenant, who will then review it and decide if it's a service complaint or if that complaint should go to internal affairs and not be dealt with by patrol supervision. Now, some agencies, everything goes right to internal affairs. But those agencies are probably dealing with with so many complaints of misconduct that it's an issue for them. So from there, it may go back to the sergeant or to the field supervisor, who will then investigate it, come up with a conclusion, and then or an outcome, and then we'll send that outcome in a report to the chief, and the chief will then make a recommendation as to what happens, and there may be a discussion about it. It's a sustained allegation, but it's because the officer swore at the complainant. And I think if you watched the video a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of swearing at our civilians, but that's that organizational culture of that particular agency. So this goes through the internal affairs process, and then talks about what happens afterwards. Take a look at the industry standard. Very important. There's still quite a bit of talk about the Civilian Review Board, so make sure that you have a good idea of the goals of the Civilian Review Board. Walker's typology is a good thing to look at. In this week's discussion board, we're going to be talking about officer-involved shootings and the use of force continuum will come up. The problem with the use of force continuum is, it makes it sound like you go through steps, and people really call for that. So bad guy steps out from his car with a gun. Well, the idea is, in use of force continuum, you give verbal commands. If you have the ability to use a baton, you use a baton. If you are, you can use a taser, you use a taser. And in the meantime, he gets off 2 or 3 rounds and hopefully he doesn't hit you. And there's a lot of people, and we'll talk about that in the discussion board, that expect the officers to make absolutely positive identification before they use deadly force. Identification of a weapon, because there's situations, and in this discussion board, there's a video that, they show, some guy getting shot by the cops, and it turns out he has a piece of plastic in his hand. But when you see the video, hopefully you'll be able to see what the officer sees and maybe get some idea of the tension. So, use of force continuum, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center diagram is the one that you have on your in the PowerPoint flecked, and take a look at that. So I think we should probably beat use of force pretty pretty hard this week. Remember that the way that I put it is the offender brings lots of things to the party. They may be pissed off. They may be having a bad day with the family. They may have just gotten fired. They may be a drug user. They may be a felon. 75% of people that are involved in fatal OISs, officer-involved shootings, are under the influence of alcohol or drugs. I didn't see the rest of that study, but I wonder what percentage of the other 25% were mentally ill and made bad choices. The San Diego shooting is one of those that may be a discussion there. And I don't know the outcome. You may find out from, some other place, or from as to what's going on with that. And the thing is that officers, when they're involved, in the field, things are happening right now. They're not happening over the course of time where they can think, a process through, where they can identify solutions. Things are happening right now, immediately, and it's go time. So officers may not have the ability to, to make choices on things with good information. With that, also there's some stuff on the less lethal technology. I've got included the bean bags in there. My little golden retriever puppy Enzo just walked in the room. I've got something on bean bags. Bean bags you don't see much anymore. Part of the problem is that they often resulted in not necessarily serious injuries, but injuries that look pretty nasty. Less lethal technology and the idea of 40 millimeter sponge rounds. Those are less lethal because, they can have bad outcomes also. Use them in crowd control, and some other times when a distance longer than the taser, was your fighting distance, and you weren't, 20 feet away, but you were 40 feet away. And with the less lethal, it depends on how motivated the offender is. If the offender is really motivated, pepper spray is not going to work. People can fight through it. I was at a training class and it was just a bunch of other cops, and you had some things to do after you were hit with the pepper spray, and everybody got through it, and had to fight their way through such situations. So pepper spray is great if the offender doesn't want to fight. If they do, then you got to, you hope you got your skill set going for the day. Beanbag 40 mil, same thing. It hurts, but if a person's motivated, they're going to continue to fight through it. Taser. Taser will stop most people, a big number of people, but only until the taser is no longer being discharged. And then people are right back into the fight if they want to be. If you watch cops, you'll see, you won't see it all the time because most people give up after being, hit by a taser, but they're not really into the fight. But some guys get hit with it, they go down, and they're right back in the fight. So, taser, great deal, it's a great weapon or device, but it's not, it doesn't solve all problems. 2 cases for you. Tennessee versus Garner, the fleeing felon rule. Used to be you could shoot felons. When I first started at the police department, a couple of years prior to me starting, one of our guys shot a guy doing a burglary, trying to run away from him. It was a Garner situation. Shot him and was justified shooting. A couple of years later, Tennessee versus Garner comes out, and that is it changes that rule. The other rule is Graham versus Connor, and that's the idea of objective reasonableness to use the amount of force necessary to stop a problem. Take a look at Connor and take a look at Garner. If you're going into even probation, really important, especially Connor, because in probation you will more than likely have to use force at some point, even juvenile probation. And that Garner standard is what you're going to be held to. Force that was objectively reasonable at the time the force was applied. Okay, so we had trouble with the first video. This is the second video. Let me see if it works and if it saves. If not, you'll see me doing this tomorrow because I'm done. Hey, we'll catch